Welcome back to Kings of United States. If you're tuning in today, you're in for a true American treasure. We're diving into the extraordinary, joyful, and trailblazing life of a woman who brought laughter into millions of homes and hearts across the world, Betty White. A legend, a pioneer, and a light that never seemed to dim. Her story is not just one of talent, but of resilience, kindness, and longevity. So grab your seat, turn up the volume, and let's celebrate one of the most beloved figures in entertainment history. Betty Marion White was born on January 17, 1922, in Oak Park, Illinois. Her parents were Tess and Horace White. When she was just over a year old, her family moved to Los Angeles, California. That move would end up placing her right where she needed to be, as if fate had already written her story. Young Betty grew up in the Golden State with big dreams and a bigger smile. As a child, she loved the outdoors, animals, and writing. But it was during her high school years that she discovered something else, a love for performance. Her journey into showbiz didn't start with a giant red carpet moment. In fact, Betty White's early days in the industry were all about grinding through small roles and live TV work. She was there when television was just becoming a thing, yes, the early 1940s, when most people didn't even own a TV yet. She started her career in radio and gradually moved into television, working as an assistant and performing in small parts. And little by little, she carved out her space. Betty's official television debut came in 1939, when she and a classmate sang songs from The Merry Widow on an experimental TV broadcast in Los Angeles. At that moment, no one could have known that the young woman in front of the camera would someday become one of the most recognized and adored faces in the history of television. But success didn't come immediately. After World War II, Betty worked as a model, and even took odd jobs, including volunteering for the American Women's Voluntary Services. She eventually landed a spot co-hosting Hollywood on television in 1949. The show was live, 5.5 hours a day, 6 days a week. It was exhausting. But Betty loved it. She was quick, smart, and endlessly charming. Before long, people started noticing her spark. In 1952, Betty co-founded her own production company, Yes, at a time when very few women were doing that. She produced and starred in Life with Elizabeth, which made her one of the first women to have creative control, both in front of and behind the camera. That alone was revolutionary. And she was just getting started. Through the 50s and 60s, Betty White became a regular presence in American households. She guest-starred in a range of shows and was a familiar face on game shows like Password, Match Game, The $25,000 Pyramid, and Hollywood Squares. Her quick wit, radiant smile, and charm made her a perfect fit for live television. And people couldn't get enough. But then came the role that would forever etch her into pop culture, Sue Ann Nivens on The Mary Tyler Moore Show. Introduced in the show's 4th season, Sue Ann was sugary sweet on the outside and hilariously sarcastic underneath. Betty's portrayal was so pitch-perfect, so magnetic, that she won 2 Emmy Awards for the role. The world saw not just a lovable lady, but a razor-sharp comedic talent. After that, there was no stopping her. In 1985, Betty White joined the cast of The Golden Girls as Rose Nylund, a role that would become one of the most iconic in television history. Rose was lovable, naive, and always had a wild story about St. Olaf. Betty played her to perfection. The chemistry between the cast, B. Arthur, Rue McClanahan, Estelle Getty, and Betty was pure magic. The show ran for 7 seasons and won multiple awards. And even decades later, The Golden Girls remains a fan favorite around the world. Betty didn't slow down after The Golden Girls. She continued acting well into her 80s and 90s. She guest-starred on The Practice, Boston Legal, Community, That 70s Show, and starred in Hot in Cleveland, proving time and again that age was just a number. In 2010, after a hilarious Super Bowl commercial for Snickers went viral, fans launched a Facebook campaign to have Betty White host Saturday Night Live. The campaign worked. At 88 years old, Betty became the oldest person to ever host SNL, and she absolutely crushed it. That appearance introduced her to a whole new generation. Suddenly, Betty White wasn't just a golden girl, she was a golden icon for young and old alike. But Betty White wasn't just about comedy. She was a lifelong animal lover and advocate. She worked with the Los Angeles Zoo, the Morris Animal Foundation, and countless other organizations. She often said that if she hadn't gone into showbiz, she would have become a zookeeper or veterinarian. Animals were her passion, and she spent decades raising money, awareness, and love for their causes. What made Betty so universally loved wasn't just her talent, it was her authenticity. She was genuinely kind, hilariously funny, and incredibly sharp. She never tried to be anyone else. She embraced aging with grace and humor. She loved hard, laughed often, and lifted everyone around her. Even as trends changed, as TV evolved, and as generations came and went, Betty White remained relevant. That's rare. In fact, it's almost unheard of. But Betty did it by being herself, and letting her spirit shine through every performance, every interview, every joke, and every moment of silence. She didn't need to try hard. She was the moment every time she showed up. Over her career, Betty won 5 Primetime Emmy Awards, a Daytime Emmy, a Grammy Award, and was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. She was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame, received the Screen Actors Guild Life Achievement Award, and in 2010, she was recognized by Guinness World Records for having the longest TV career for a female entertainer. But if you asked Betty what mattered most, it wouldn't have been the awards. It would have been the laughter she shared, the animals she helped, and the friendships she built. In her personal life, Betty was married 3 times, but the love of her life was Alan Ludden, a television host and her 3rd husband. They met on the game show Password, and married in 1963. They stayed together until Alan's death in 1981. Betty never remarried. She once said that she had the best, so why look for more? Betty White passed away peacefully on December 31, 2021, just a few weeks shy of her 100th birthday. The news sent shockwaves across the world. But even in her passing, people chose to celebrate rather than mourn. The hashtag #BettyWhite challenge went viral, encouraging fans to donate to animal shelters in her honor. And they did. In huge numbers. That's the kind of impact she had, one that moves people to do good in her name. Betty White wasn't just a comedian. She wasn't just a TV star. She was joy personified. She was proof that kindness can win. That humor never ages. That women can lead. That creativity doesn't expire. That every stage of life has value. She paved the way for generations of women in entertainment, and she did it all while making us laugh until we cried. In a world full of short-lived fame, Betty White stood for something lasting. She was our TV grandma, our internet queen, our comedy genius. And the most beautiful part? She knew how lucky she was, but she never let it go to her head. Even after nearly 70 years in the spotlight, Betty was still humble, still hungry, and still hilarious. She once said, "I just make it my business to get along with people so I can have fun." It's that simple. And maybe that's why we loved her so much. Because she reminded us that joy is simple. That life is precious. And that laughter truly is the best medicine. Today, her legacy lives on in every rerun of The Golden Girls, every game show clip, every laugh track, and every animal shelter donation made in her honor. Betty White didn't just leave behind a career, she left behind a feeling. And that feeling? It's love. So here's to Betty White. A pioneer. A powerhouse. And above all, a person who made this world a better, brighter, and more beautiful place. Thanks for being with us on Kings of United States. If this story warmed your heart, made you smile, or brought back memories, do us a favor, hit that like button, share this video with everyone who needs a dose of joy, and don't forget to subscribe for more legendary stories just like this. We'll keep celebrating the lives that made America laugh, dream, and believe. Until next time, stay golden and remember, thank you for being a friend.